Well, welcome to our second to the last training for the year. Happy Tuesday, and I'm glad you could make it. I see people are still kind of piling in, so we're going to give it a minute or two. But just kind of as a reminder, this week and next week will be our last trainings for 2019, which I'm still having trouble wrapping my brain around. Hey, Mark, how you doing? All right, Mark gives me the thumbs up. SNH, which is seeing and hearing. Awesome. And, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving last week. I mean, last week for me was kind of crazy because I had my son come in. We had all of our chicks in the nest, and we just had a really great time. I hope you did too. I hope you had a very blessed time with family and friends, and just kind of remembering what it is that you could be thankful for. Because no matter what, I mean, things can be tough, but I've kind of adopted a philosophy that things can always get worse. I mean, I'm tremendously blessed. Don't get me wrong, but for the most part, we get so used to the routine that we're in all the time that we sometimes take things for granted. I know I'm guilty of that just as much as anybody, maybe even more, and I try not to be. But that's why I have on my phone, I think I may have mentioned this before, but every 3 hours, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning all the way till 9 p.m., I have a reminder on my phone to remember, just says, be thankful. So, and try to be thankful every day, every moment of the day, because there is a lot to be thankful for. All right, so we've got Jay, we've got Janana, we've got Peter. Hey, Peter, saw you this afternoon. Awesome. Kevin and Juan and Mark. All right, so those are those of you who have chimed in anyway. So what I want to do tonight is go through the new illustration software with you, and I have a couple of examples to show you when it comes to how private family banking numbers will look. I mean, if you've been following us and building or working towards building your business, you'll know that when I am talking to a prospect, like I was talking this morning, I basically tell them, well, I don't basically tell them, this is almost exactly what I tell them every time when it comes to the close of the initial consultation and I begin to prep them for the steps to come. I always tell them what I love about what I do is this is all about the numbers. There's no fancy sales technique, no crazy closing strategy that's going to hypnotize you into doing something you may not actually want to do. What we're going to do is look at your numbers, and your numbers are going to be numbers that you're either going to like them or you won't. And if you like them, that's great. We can talk about next steps and get you started. If you don't like them, that's great too, because at least then you'll know that this won't work. This won't meet your needs. It's rare that happens, but nothing is perfect and nothing is 100%. I said, but I tell people my only job is to make sure you know what the numbers are, how they work, and what they mean for you, your family, your future. And so that when you look at the numbers and you fully understand what they mean for you, then those numbers will dictate your decision. My obligation is to make sure that whatever decision you make is one that you feel real good about. Pretty much it. And I have had, every time I say that, every single time, people say in one way or another, in different words, that sounds great, or sounds good, or awesome. I mean, they realize, and what I do when I say that is I get them to kind of bring down the defenses, because I don't want people thinking that I'm trying to sell them stuff. And you've heard me say this before, we don't sell, we teach. It just so happens that what we teach brings up the reality for the person we're teaching that they really need this strategy. I mean, let's face it, that's the only reason why we're doing what we're doing. John and I, and now you've joined us on our mission. And the only reason we're all together doing this is because we really understand people really need this. And if they don't have this and they don't have another plan, 92%, according to the National Institute on Retirement Research, I forget what the name of the association is, excuse me, but 92% of everyone we see will never be able to retire comfortably. They most likely will never be able to quit working, at least part-time. And that's just a tragedy. I mean, today when we were doing the Smart Wealth University monthly webinar, which as a member of the Agent Academy, if you can make it, you can. I mean, you can register for that, and that those trainings and those online classroom sessions are also in the Agent Academy portal under the Smart Wealth System course, and you find that navigation bar and you click on it, brings down the drop down. The last selection is the online classroom. Got stuff going all the way back to 2015 because that was our first course that we started doing in this setting that we have. So, but in any case, when it comes to the private family bank, the numbers, which is the illustration software, that's the, I guess you could say that's the one of, if not the most important tools we have, because everything else is theory. When someone sees their numbers, that is what will convince them that this is something that will work for them. So we're going to review that tonight. And another item to remember is that this week and next week, that will not only be the last training sessions for the year, they will also be the last training sessions on this platform. We're going to move to Zoom starting the second week, I believe, in maybe it is. Yeah, I think it'll be the first Tuesday will be, I think, like the 6th or something like that of January. So that will be on Zoom. So as we do every year, the training sessions will be updated and new registration links will go out. So you'll be getting those probably towards the second half of December. So just make sure that you register. Also make sure that you register for the Smart Wealth University training, which is done on the first Tuesday of every month, but that's done at 1 o'clock in the 1 p.m. Arizona time. And we kept that at Arizona time because it just makes our days a little easier to manage. And when daylight saving time kicks in, it becomes a shift for you. And then when it, like what we did just a few weeks ago where we fall back, it becomes a shift for you then. But otherwise, it's 1 p.m. every first Tuesday of each month. And just good stuff. We talked today about the Agent Academy and the Online Business Academy for people who are looking to make more money. You're here tonight because you want to be a part of our team. You wanted to be in a plug-and-play situation as much as possible. You didn't want to have to create online funnels. You didn't want to have to create online scheduling systems. You didn't want to create all the stuff that the swap system gives you. And you don't want to have to worry about creating content and marketing material. All the stuff that you need to do the business that we're doing has already been done, and all you got to do is plug in and start using it. So, but let's go ahead and take a look at the software, the illustration software that we use with Lafayette. So there's a few things that are different. We're just going to start a sample case. And then what we're going to do after we go through this is I'm going to review a couple different, what I did was I found some Patriot 15 illustrations that I thought would be good. And I ran the Patriot 20, where actually it's now called the Patriot 2020. That's going to be what this new system will generate. You won't be able to get to the previous illustration software for new cases. If you have old cases that you've gotten an application for prior to, or I should say by November 22nd, you can still close those cases under the old mortality tables. And as long as the policy is issued by December 31st, it doesn't necessarily have to have a payment, but as long as the policy is issued, then you can have those old tables. And you'll see that in some ways, the old tables are a little bit more favorable. We're going to go through some of that tonight. And this, by the way, this training about the new software, tonight is more like just an introduction. Next week, we're going to kind of pick up with a little bit more of some nuances that can be done, how to ensure that what we're doing is always in the best possible interest for our prospects, our clients. In my conversation today with one of the folks that I'm working on illustrations for, he'd done some research. I mean, let's face it, people who are coming to us, there are a certain number of them, probably, I'm going to say about 15% of the people I've talked to, they have done some research. They've, like, for instance, the gentleman this afternoon, or I should say this morning, he read Pam Yellen's book. I think she's the one who wrote the book Be Your Own Banker. I forget the other author who has Bank on Yourself. Then there is the IBC, or the Infinite Banking community. There are a number of different outfits, I don't know what you call them, agencies, whatever you want to refer to them as. There are a number of them that essentially use this strategy. This strategy is a highly modified whole life insurance product. And we're going to go through a little bit of the new software. Not much has changed, but what has changed is important to know. And but everybody who has who does this business, the mortality tables and all of the different data points that are used to generate projections, it's mandatory across the board in the entire industry. So it's not like Lafayette's the only one who's doing this. In fact, the tables were, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they were completed in 2017. And then once they were presented, all the companies they give the companies 2 years, they being the regulatory bodies over the life insurance industry. They give them 2 years to update their software that is used to generate illustrations like what we're going to be looking at tonight. So it's an industry-wide thing. Every single insurance industry or insurance company who does what we do will have the same impact. And by the way, Lafayette Life Insurance is one of the more popular companies that is used for this type of contract because they're so supportive of what we do, and they pretty much get it. And you'll see there's some things that have been added to the illustration software that I think are going to be good to look at. They're going to be favorable for our clients. So anyway, just to run an illustration and walk through it with you, let's just go ahead and give this is Beth, and her last name is, I'll just call it Beth Smith. And she is now, let's do it the right way. I always get the birthday of the individual. For instance, today when I got the individual's information to generate his illustrations, his birthday was the 5th of January. So let's say this person is 01/15, and they were born in 1968. So they're 51, is a male. Beth is a female, excuse me. And so then I name the case. The case is named Smith _B, and for Beth, and she's going to put in $500 a month. There we go. All right. So pretty much the same process up to this point. She lives in Indiana, and we're looking at whole life, and we're going to find available products. Now you'll see when you go through this that there is the 10-pay 2020, 10-pay life. There's two versions of each product because we're in a transition phase with the company. They still have to honor for a few more weeks the 15 tables, or the 15 version of each product. So this is double what we normally see. I don't know when the 15 option will go away. I'm guessing after the first of the year sometime, if not right after the first of the year. But you won't be able to, like, say, here's the Patriot, which is what we choose. If I click select here, whoops, this product's no longer available, so I can't do it. So what I have to do is I have to go back. Yep, let's try this. It's not going to let me do it. All right. Let's see, can I go back here? Yes, so I guess it's still not working with me. All right, well, let's try and let's just go to start a new case. Come on. I love it when stuff goes, or when this type of stuff happens. All right, it's still not letting me do it. All right, I'm gonna close it down and relaunch it. So note to self and to you, to all of us, don't click on, for a new illustration, don't click on any of the 15 options, because they're really only there for people who have existing contracts in play, for illustrations that have already been generated, and for applications that have already been submitted on or before November 22nd. So we'll go ahead and start a new case again. And again, we have Beth Smith, and her birthday was 01/15/1968. And we go to Smith, B, and we said she's going to be putting in $500 a month. And we choose, I think what we choose, we chose, doesn't really matter, whole life. This time we're going to choose the Patriot 2020. All right. So the first thing we do is I think this is another change, because I've seen this recently. Our first step always has been to change this from preferred to standard. I believe they changed the default to standard, which is great. That's one less thing for us to worry about. But I will be checking it constantly just to be sure, because we start with standard for a few different reasons, and I'll give a quick explanation. I actually did a training on this a few weeks or a couple months or so ago, but when only 20% of your prospects will qualify for preferred rating. A couple of things about a preferred rating. Number one, to be a preferred to be able to qualify for preferred rating, you have to be able to have a base policy death benefit of a minimum of $100,000. And for standard, the minimum is 25. So that means you don't have to have as much base contribution, which is always a good thing for the most part when you're building an illustration. But more importantly, since if you were to run an illustration for someone who is as preferred, they have an 80% chance of being knocked down to standard. And what that means is that the numbers that they see in the illustration you sold them on will not be as good in actuality, because a preferred rating means their excuse me, their insurance costs are cheaper because they're healthier, and their cash value numbers will perform slightly better. So what we've always done is to illustrate a standard, and what happens is when someone has, after they've gone through the exam and everything, gets rated as preferred, like I had just a couple weeks ago, you go back to them and say, hey, I got great news. Because you got rated preferred, your numbers will be even better than what we thought about, than what we talked about when we reviewed your illustration. And that's a much easier sell than to go back 4 times out of 5, roughly, and say, got news for you. You were rated as standard, not preferred, so the numbers won't be as good. But they're still good. I mean, that's just not a good way to go. Not to mention, what I will say in some cases, depending on the people I'm talking with, if they, during the initial consultation, if they've told me, yeah, I've been looking around, I've got a couple illustrations that I'm looking at, I'll ask them if what they were rated at, is if they know. And if they say, most of the time, the competition is running them as preferred, which is a bait and switch. I mean, that's the way I look at it. If you run a preferred illustration knowing that they have a 80% chance roughly of being reduced in their rating, then you're selling them on numbers that are unrealistic. So anyway, this is one positive thing, one less thing to do, but just check to make sure that the class rating is standard. And then you're going to come down to the writer section and work our way back up the first thing we do with the riders is click on Level Premium PUA, and this button has been called the Marcy button all along. It was labeled something else. I don't really know what it was, but this is, now they call it Raise LPUA Premium to MEC Limit. And I did a training on this 3 weeks ago. So if you're not sure what that means, look in the archive and look for the importance of the Marcy button. I think is in the title, something like that. You'll see Marcy button in the title and watch that training. It goes through why that's so important. But you just want to come from client information, making sure that they're standard, down to riders, click on the LPUA premium, and then click on this button. And then we're going to go up to premium. And it always defaults to an annual payment mode. We want to change it to monthly. So the only thing so far that's changed is that the client information rating is defaulted to standard. Otherwise, everything else with the way we were running illustrations hasn't changed. And now we go to solves. Now this is where we have a couple different options, a couple different things that we can look at. What we're going to solve for is the base PUA blend. Okay. Now, if someone's putting in $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. So you put in the annual premium total. Okay. Now you'll notice you have base, LPUA, fixed. This is level premium paid up additions rider. This is a new one called the fixed premium paid up additions rider, or fixed paid up additions rider. From what I've seen so far, the only time this might be useful is when you're talking to someone who is older, like in their 60s or so, because this premium is allowed to be paid up until age 85, I believe. Now you might be thinking, well, hey, why don't I do that for all of my clients? The problem with this one is there's much less flexibility than there is with the LPUA premium, the one we've always used. So don't change this. What you're going to want is to make sure that the base premium and the LPUA premium totals equal 100%. So what we've been doing is 65% for the base, and now up until the new software was done, if you just put in 65, then it would default the balance to 100% into this field. But now since there's two, you have to make sure the total is there. Now, what you could do is you could say, oh, I'll do 25% and then 10% here. Oops. Okay. We'll be talking about that in the future. I don't want to get into that right now. I don't want to make your heads explode right now. So we're just going to be talking about base plus the LPUA, what we've always been doing. And then you'll notice the button for avoiding MEC options. Here's where we've got some additional choices. The only options before were 10 and 20 year. And what we now have is 7, 10, 15, 20, and 30-year terms. Now, this is very, very good because, for instance, one of the gentlemen I spoke with this morning, he's in his 60s. So we're all going to work on a 7-year plan. So I'm only going to need a 7-year term. The 7-year term is specifically, this is why we love Lafayette. They realize that, the MEC limit or the MEC line, the 7-pay rule by the IRS. David mentioned, don't make my mistake. Base is the lower percentage. Yes, this is true. But now let's say if you've got somebody like, I talked to a gentleman who's in his late 50s and he wants to just do a contract for the minimum amount of time. The 7-year term would be the choice for him, because when you do, what we used to do is do a 10-year term and then turn it off after 7 years. But the 10-year term, that monthly premium is going to be a little higher than 7. I'm not going to get into the reasons why, because it's all about charts and how charts and averages work. Some of you who are experienced life insurance people know that when you're looking at a term policy, if it's a 20-year term, what they'll do is they will take the premiums that for each age and average it out over 20 years. And what that means, in the early years, you're paying more than the actual cost, but in the later years, you're paying less than the actual cost. I'm not going to get into all the details, then it probably already gotten a little too deep as it is. But what you'll be able to do is choose a term that is going to be much more indicative of what their total timeline for making the contributions would be. If you're talking to somebody who's maybe 30 years old, this 30-year term is great because that means they'll be able to make the contribution for 30 years all the way, as opposed to 20 years, meaning what we used to do is we used to tell people, well, you'll notice when you look at the illustration, the difference between year 20 and year 21, there's a bunch of differences, and we had to explain why. Well, you won't have to do that now if they're going to do more, if they're going to be able to, if they're young enough to make contributions for more than 20 years. So this is a great option. So these choices just make our job a little bit easier. Now, she was 50, how old was it? 51. Okay. So I'm going to choose a 15-year term. 51 to age 66, not a bad idea, right? So that's going to be much more efficient with the use of her funds, the $500 a month. Okay, so here we go. We're going to click View Illustration, and I'm going to have to switch windows once it pops up. I like this with Zoom because this whole thing with the window switching does get irritating when you're doing a training. And you'll notice it comes up with a little thing that says the LPUA paid up additions rider must be added. Just ignore that. Just ignore any of this stuff. The riders indicate have been turned off. That's not really doing anything to the situation. All right, so now we need to switch the window that's being shared. Okay, and let me pull it up. And here we have the illustration. I'm going to jump all the way down to page 10. And you'll notice the way the illustration, page 10's data is presented is a little different. I actually like this. At first, I was like, this is kind of silly, but then it made sense, and I felt, you know what, this looks good. Okay, and here's the reason why. You'll notice that the base policy contribution here is $325. Oh, did I do this wrong? Let me take a peek here. Hold on a second. Why is that showing? David, I just did what you told me not to do. Let's close that window down. What I did was exactly what David said not to do. He reminded me not to do this, and I did it anyway. I put 65% towards base. That's not going to work. So I'm going to close that down. Let's get back here and go back into the illustration software. And now the first thing I'm going to do before I change any numbers here is go back to riders, and I'm going to recheck the Marcy button. Does the screen look blurry, or is it just me? Juan is asking. There's a couple things that actually David has a couple questions. He reminded me the base is lower, the lower percentage, which I read the thing and I still screwed it up. And David said, so if a person wants to pay in longer, you have to extend the term. Is that correct? Yes. So what we used to do is the maximum was 20 years. Now it's up to 30. And typically that means that if they're younger, they still, with the LPUA, which is level paid up additions rider, that still caps out at age 75. And so you guys are saying that it's blurry. I think it just might be this monitor, because I have trouble at times reading the monitor too. We might have to get a new one here. Let's see if I make it a little bigger, if that helps. I hope that makes it a little better. So anyway, what we're going to do is we recheck the raise, the Marcy button, come back to solves. Everything else is not going to be changed. And base is 35%. LPUA is 65%. We're going to check the button to avoid MEC options. And we're going to choose a 15-year term. Again, based on the timeline that the individual is going to be contributing. And one of the things I've started asking my prospects, and this is something you might want to consider as well, when I ask them for the frequency and the amount and the frequency of their contribution, when they tell me that, I ask them, how long do you see yourself making that contribution? And I'll add to that, we always recommend to make that contribution for as long as you possibly can, because all you're doing is saving more money. And I've never heard anybody tell me in all of the years I've been doing this, not one person has ever said, boy, you know what I really regret? Saving a lot of money. No one's ever regretted that. They've always regretted not starting early enough and not saving enough. So I make sure I get the time frame that they want to make contributions, and then that will help me with how we're going to structure their contract. Okay, so hopefully the blurriness is a little bit improved. Okay, so now we've got the base at 35, the PUA at 65. We're going to click illustration, view illustration. And while that's generating, I'm going to turn off the screen share and turn it back on to the illustration. And there we go. This time we should have an illustration with, should I make this bigger? There we go. And now let's go ahead and scroll all the way down to page 10. There we go. There it is. Okay, so the PUA is at 298, okay, which is just about 60%. The term rider is $26.77. The base policy is $175 a month. Okay. Now, one of the things that they've done is they've added this little set of numbers. And what is really important about this is many times I have been asked, what if I can't make my premium payment? Now, with this information, the $500 this is what they're obligated to keep the contract alive. So they have roughly $300 in wiggle room that they can choose to use if they need some flexibility in their payment. The fixed paid up additions rider does not provide that type of flexibility. You can miss making those premiums, but I think that if you miss 3, it's like 3 strikes and you're out, you lose the option, whereas you can skip a year with this and then backfill. The flexibility with the level paid up additions rider, LPUA, is still supremely better than the fixed PUA. And the only time I would consider using fixed PUA is when I'm talking with someone who's a little older, has money, and wants to put in contributions beyond age 75. That's when it's possible, and we might do a split. Again, I'm still learning this and still studying it myself, so I'm not going to get into that tonight. Just going back to the basics so that you can see how this stuff works. And then what you'll notice is that $500 a month is $6,000 a year. This is what I've noticed up to this point, is that the MEC line seems to be higher. It seems like there's more money, more term being purchased than what used to be required. And this is all driven by the mortality tables. So when we look at this, we have to know and remember every single life insurance company that's doing our competition, I guess you could say, they're being driven with the same information. Their mortality tables are, all of the illustrations will be impacted the same way. Okay, so then this information here used to be over here, so they've moved it down, and they've added this column, which I find to be very helpful, because what this column tells us is this is your minimum payment. This is what you should be making contributions for. And this is your MEC line. And you actually built into this contract, they have $2,771 in headroom every year, already built in. In my mind, I think this number could be reduced, but we're still looking at the nuances to the new software. It was just released last week. Last week was a holiday week, so we really weren't digging into it that much, but we're digging into this more and more, and we're going to have more of the nuances next week and in the weeks to come after that, and when we get back online after the first of the year. Okay, so the presentation has changed a little bit. The same information is being offered, but they're giving us this in addition to what was presented before, and I like this because this tells us, again, the flexibility involved. The MEC lines seem to be a little bit higher, which means there's more headroom, and the same information is caused from here, years 1 to 7. They could put this much in with regard to how much they want to contribute. This is where we check that Marcy button. If you don't check that Marcy button, this number doesn't get calculated. It just gets calculated at that number. This number is going to be the same. All of these numbers will be the same, but without checking that Marcy button, this is not going to be displayed. Oh, Mark is saying page 10 is now, yeah, that's right. It's page 13. Boy, that's going to be a little tough to get used to, because for the entire time I've been doing this, it's been page 10. So now we got to drop down to page 13. Thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. I didn't notice that before. I didn't even look at the page numbers until you mentioned that. And you're right. All right. So, okay, this is all pretty much the same. The numbers are different. We're going to, again, look at some of the nuances. So next week, I'm going to be between now and next week looking at this more and more, working with Rocky, who is our general agent, the guy who actually created the private family banking system John and I plugged into, and we're building our agency, and you're plugged into what we're doing. But Rocky's the one who created all of the idea for that we plugged into, and great guy. And he, when you're licensed, will be providing you Mondays and Wednesdays. Mondays are new agent trainings where he teaches you how to do the software. And then Wednesdays are a little bit advanced. Those are the ones that John and I join on. Those are during the day. I think Monday is Central Time, like 10 a.m. And then Wednesdays are always 1 p.m. Central Time. So those are great if you can make those trainings. Once you're licensed and you have the appointment, that's when you get invited to those trainings. Our trainings are available to you when you become an Agent Academy member. So if you haven't gotten invited to Rocky's training, when you get licensed and you get me your appointment paperwork, I bring that over to Rocky, and his office will process it, and then they'll reach out to you once the appointment is complete. Okay, so this is the same information, just a little bit formatted a little bit differently. Okay, so let's go ahead and go up to the tabular detail. These are the numbers that really matter. Okay, now putting in $6,000 a year, the break even on these numbers is not year 5 or 6, but year 7. And this is a little frustrating to me, okay? But at the same time, one of the things that we have to remember is that new clients, new prospects, they won't know. They won't have the comparison. I think I'm going to have some ideas worked out for next week where we can get the numbers more favorable for our clients. So make sure you join me next week as well. And then the annual break even for this isn't until year 13, right? Yeah. I have been tinkering with some options that I believe will get us to where we used to be, year 5 and 6 for the annual break even, and then year 10 and 11 for the overall break even. Okay. However, this column, the death benefit is better. Okay. And you'll see that in the comparisons we're going to look at in a few minutes. So that's how we go through the software now. Okay, the 65-35 split, this is what will happen. If you want to know what those comparisons look like between what the software used to generate and what the software now generates, we're going to look at that in just a minute. Before I do that, I want to stop, take a sip of my coffee, and see if any of you have some questions. So if you do, type in. Okay. All right, so let's turn that off. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I almost clicked the button to end the webinar. That would have been a big mistake. Okay, so now let's take a look at, there it is, at the illustration. What I have here are two different illustrations that I've done that I was able to pull the Patriot 15 examples and run the exact same numbers. And let me explain what I mean when I say numbers. I'm talking about the same split and dollar amounts. I'm not looking at death benefit. I'm not looking at things that that would be anything other than how the contribution of the prospect is being allocated. These are exactly the same. What will be different are the numbers that are generated. All right, so I see a couple of questions. Juan is asking, what would be the difference between the 3565 compared to the 4060 we used to do? Great question. Okay. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and go back to the illustration software because I do want to. I'm doing this because Juan's question has everything to do with this particular thing. Before we used to do a 60-40 split. What we did is we did a solve for, and in the example that we're using of $500 a month or $6,000 a year, 40% of $6,000 was $2,400. And we used to do the solve for $2,400, but we did a solve. There was one called face amount. It doesn't exist anymore. Now, there's a roundabout way that they're looking at doing, but I don't even think it's necessary. The difference here, see if I can explain this without doing, without any visual. Just think of it this way. When we did the old way that Juan is referring to, where we took 40% and put it towards the base and 60% and put it towards the PUA, when we ran to calculate everything and we added the term rider as well, okay, to get the amount that we needed to keep the contract compliant with the 7 payroll, the 2,400 out of the 2,400 was where the term contribution came from. And so in the example that we're running with Beth Smith and our made up lady here, I know what to do. This will probably be helpful. Let's go back to the illustration. Okay. So you'll notice that the 60% of the PUA, oh, hold on. This is, oh, we'll use this. Okay. In this example, the individual's putting in $570. When we used to do the 60-40 split, this was the hard number. 60% was always being used. 60% times the overall contribution was here. The 40%, or in this case, the $199.50 was not the fixed number. Okay, well, let me go back to Beth's example. Hopefully, all this screen shifting isn't going to mess things up. And okay, we're going to go down to, because I like working with round numbers, it'll be easier to understand there. Okay, 60% of 500 is $300. 40% of 500 is $200. So when we used to do the splits that Juan is referring to, this number was always exactly 60% of what this number was. Okay, and then the 200 would be, in this case, would be a little less than 200, and it would be, in this case, it would be the 200 minus whatever it cost for the term. But this number was always 60%. When we started using the base PUA blend solve, which is, we drop down for, what the solves are. Instead of taking the amount to pay for the term rider from the base contribution, it takes it from the PUA contribution. I don't know why, just the way they do it. So that's why I switched it to 3565, because it basically came out with roughly the same contribution amount. And I covered this in a training a while ago when we first started switching over to this new solve method. So when somebody reads the book, watches the video, and maybe they're watching some of the other content, and they hear about the 60-40 split, if this number was right around 60% or more, it was a little easier to, it just made it a little bit more easier to explain. The bottom line is that the reason we switched from 60-40 to 65-35 is because of where the term rider amount is being taken from. The term premium payment is being taken from. Now it's coming off the PUA premium and not the base. So that's the reason it's been shifted, because of where the software deducts the term premium payment from. I hope that made sense. So if I've just confused you more, I'm sorry. Anyway, so that is why that is. And then Jay is asking, can we do business in other countries like Asia? Unfortunately, no. The reason that we can't do this business in other countries is because these contracts are very specific to U.S. law and IRS rules and tax rules. Some can be done in Canada. We don't do them. I'm not licensed in Canada. We have somebody up in Canada that once in a blue moon I'll refer someone to. But unfortunately, everything's done based on U.S. tax law and insurance regulations. So, okay. So here we have the a sample of, you'll notice up here, are you seeing that up there? Yeah, you are. Okay, great. You'll notice that, what in the world? There we go. Okay. I've got the initials BA sample, followed by 15. That means it's the Patriot 15. Then there's the sample with a Patriot 20. Okay. And here is $570 in contribution with a 35-65 blend split. And you'll notice with the Patriot 15, which is no longer available, of the 570, 359, let me make this a little bigger because it is a little difficult to see. Where's the plus sign there? No, that's not it. There it is. Make it a little bigger. We'll close this down. And this will be easier to see. There. So 359.79 is the PUA contribution. 199.50 is 35% of this number. 65% of this number is split here between here and here. Okay. So we've got 199.50, 1071, and 359.79 under the Patriot 15 example. Let's take a look at the Patriot 20. We're going to get rid of that and make it bigger like we did before. Oops, that's a little too big. Again, the 199.50 is here, but instead of $10 and change, it's 16 and change. So $6 came off of the PUA contribution because of the mortality tables that was required to be done. I don't know what goes into running all these calculations. I just know that that's where these numbers come from. So what has happened is that there is more money going towards term. But now let's take a look at the term. We have $125,000 in term purchased for the term rider, 20-year, right? 20-year term. Or is this? No, I'm sorry. This said, 20-year term. And the base is $115,010. Go back to the Patriot 15. There's $75,000 in term. So there's more term being purchased. And I believe this is because it's a little bit confusing to me, but as I thought about it, the mortality tables that came out in 2017 basically said that everybody's living longer, so the cost of insurance should be cheaper, and it is. But then what happens, and I think these numbers, because if we bought $75,000 in contributions here, if we use that again here, we've got an extra $40,000. I believe it's because more money is going towards the cash value, or at least it would. And so over the life of the contract, there needs to be more term. I'm still trying to figure that out. Right now, what we're doing is just running the comparison and not really getting into the why so much as the what. Okay. We're going to dig into the why next week a little bit deeper. Because again, I just want to take it one chunk at a time. And I'm still making sure I have my brain wrapped around it as well. So here we have the difference in term, and we have 115,000 in the 2015. It was 75. Now it's 125 for term. The base is 115 in the new software. Now the base, which wasn't presented here, you had to go up to the top of the page and look. It's the same. Okay. So the same base is being applied, is being purchased, but we're buying more term. Okay. I like that the coverage amount is here now, so it's easier to explain. All right. So we also see, as we were looking at before, here the MEC line is 7571. In the previous software, it was 7,017. So basically, $500 and change more in headroom than what was provided before. Okay. Now, when we look at the numbers that when I present illustrations to my prospects, I simply say, I want to make sure that they understand what this means and what, all these numbers are. And I make sure I say, do you have any other questions about this, or do you feel that you've got a handle on it? And they'll say, oh, I think this is good. Okay. Then I'll say, let's look at the numbers that really matter. And these are the numbers that will dictate your decision. Let me make this a little smaller. Actually, I should probably make this wider and bigger. Okay. And page 1, or the first page of the tabular premium, or tabular detail. Okay. Here's where we see some pretty significant differences. I shouldn't say significant, but there's some differences. The 2015, let's go back to the 2020, go back into the 2020, okay? So we've got years 1 through 5 in 2020, increase in net cash value every year is 6520. Or 6572, excuse me. Year 5 is 6895. So a little over $300 less with the new numbers in cash value in year 5. Net cash value in year 5 is $30,059 with the 2015 versus $20,910. So about $1,100 less. The 2020 has $345,000 and almost $345,448 in death benefit versus $280 in change. So $280 versus $345 is $65,000 more in death benefit. Okay, which is not so bad considering that it's only cost them $1,000 over 5 years. Okay, year 10. The cash value here is 67,356. Let's look at the break-even points here. 6840. Again, we're looking at year 7 for the break-even $6,840 is what they put in year 7, they get $7,200 back. And this is, again, the 2020. This is the new table. The overall break even happens in year 12. This is year 11. So it's not that bad. Year 10, 11 is usually what happens. And there's a number of different things that go into dictating what the changes are. This is for, I think, a 37-year-old male. So cost of insurance is cheaper than somebody who's 51. So the numbers are a little bit different, and let's take a look at the 10-year value of the cash value. I think we looked at that before, and this was 67 in the new table versus 3. So there's about $3,000 less. Now, if we go all the way down to, let's just go down to age 68, which is this column here. This is 2015. Or excuse me, the Patriot 15. The age 68, the cash value is $324,000 versus age 68, $325,000. So $1,000 more here, okay, at age 68. The death benefit, $624,970 versus $561. So $620, it's like $60,000 more in death benefit and a little bit more cash value. To me, that's significant because these are the numbers that matter the most. The numbers that we're working with up here are a little bit different. I mean, they're still important, don't get me wrong, especially when it comes to paying off debt. With these new tables, because less cash value will be accumulating in the early years, it might extend the debt elimination process a little bit. But keep in mind, this is still better than going to the creditor directly, and it's still better than doing nothing. So this is still a great plan. And in this example, the individual at age 68 has $1,000 more in cash value. And what was this number? 624 versus 561. So $62 to $63,000 more in death benefit and $1,000 more in their pocket. So what that means is if they spend $300,000 here in this on these tables, what would be paid out would be $261. Under the new contract, if they used $300,000, what would be paid out would be $324,000. I don't know about you, but I know for me, in this case, I would have, if these were my numbers and I'd be looking at it, for me, it's more important what I leave behind from the people I love, and I don't want them to struggle, right? So in some cases, you'll see that the cash value in the later years is greater than it was before. The death benefit is definitely going to be greater, okay? So let's take a look at another example. This is someone who is a little older. Okay. I think this individual, I'll have to cheat and go back up here. This is a 54-year-old individual starting at age 54. Okay. So here's the required premium. This is the 2020 example and the 2015 example. Okay. For the same person. Let's get this to be a little bigger. Oops, whoop. That was a little bit too much. Center it a little bit better. I guess there's no in between there, but anyway. Okay, so here's the 2015 example. This is somebody putting in $1,000 a month for both examples. Okay, 1,000, actually 1,000, 1 penny. The 2015, the paid up additions is $626. Again, this is the same 35-65% split. $626 versus $624. Okay. The death benefit so they're putting in about $2 less, which isn't going to be that big of a deal. The death benefit for the 10-year term is $125 versus 100. So there's more being purchased in the new table. And again, I believe this is going to be the case. The base is 125, 121 versus, in this case, the initial face amount in the old one was a little bit more. So they bought less initial face amount in this example versus this example. So this is a case where the base policy contribution of $350 is buying less of a initial face amount. It's a curious observation. And that's probably why less term was purchased here. But nevertheless, the numbers are pretty close. And we have a MEC line of, from putting $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year. The MEC line is $1,300 and change under the old table. In the new table, the MEC line is closer than what it is. So basically, this is actually a little bit more efficient. So let's take a look at the tabular detail. Whoops, I'm too far. There it is, age 55, year one. And let's bring this one up. Okay, so let's look at, this is the new table versus the old table. In the old table, which is what we're looking at here, the annual break-even point is year 5, meaning they put in $12,000, net cash value growth exceeded by that amount in year 5. In the new table, it happens in year 6, happens a year later. Not too bad. 5, 6 is what we're looking for anyway. When does the overall, meaning the cumulative premium contribution, get exceeded by the total amount in the cash value? We're looking at year 10 under the old table. We've got 120,000 in contributions and 122,000 in net cash value. Under the new table, that's going to happen in year 11, 126 versus 128. Not too bad. The numbers are pretty close. And the break-even point almost takes place in year 10. So it's, again, not too bad. But again, the significance here is going to be, the difference here is going to be somewhat significant. In year 5, their death benefit is $364,512 in the new table. In year 5 here, it's $335. So almost $30,000 less in coverage. The first year is $250 versus $273. So they're coming out of the box that there is more death benefit definitely across the board with the new tables. Let's take a look at what happens at age 69. This is a case where the individual starting out at age 54, and by year 15, take a look at year 15 in the old table, 184,000 in cash, 401 in death benefit versus 175 in cash, 9,000 less, but almost 400,000 in death benefit. So there is a disparity in the amount of cash value, but they have much more death benefit. And let's face it, most people are going to be focused on this number a little bit over that number. However, this is something that we need to make sure that we're all, and I see there's a question here I'm going to take a look at in just a second. All of the prospects that you are going to be presenting this information to will never have a comparison. I kind of slowed down my booking timeline up in the weeks leading up to the new software being released because I didn't want to run into that. I knew that these numbers are going to be a little bit different, but at the same time, I knew that over the long run, people are going to wind up with the same, if not more money, but significantly more death benefit. And when someone's on their deathbed, they're not going to be worried about how much money they weren't able to spend. They're going to be focused more on how much they were able to take care of their loved ones. So if we were given the option to say, when you're in retirement, would you rather have, $20 or $50 less a month to spend versus leaving your heirs, your beneficiaries, your loved ones an extra 10 to 50 or $100,000? I know what I would say. I'd be like, I'd rather leave the extra money to my loved ones, and I don't want them to worry about me. I'm always going to be worried about them. And when you're looking at these comparisons, this is just because it's just happened this last week. And you may be talking with people now who you gave illustrations to. They never got around to starting their contract, and now they can't because their application wasn't in on time being by November 22nd. So if you've got a situation where you have a client, or I should say a prospect, that you've presented their illustration to under the old set of tables, they never took action on it for whatever reason, and now they're coming back, there's going to need to be a little bit of nuances. You're going to have to do a little finessing with that. If you have a situation like that, please let me know and I'll help you through it. It's not going to be that big a deal. I promise you that. Okay. Taking a look at this individual at age, this is what I'll say to people, when you need your death benefit, you're going to need it when you die. So at age, this is under the new tables, at age 87, under the old table, I don't know why that has to be all the way down to the next line. Let's go age 85. They lived to age 85. Under the old table, they would have had $403,000 in the bank with a $523,000 death benefit. So let's do the math. If they spent $350,000 and they died, that means $173,000 is left for their loved ones. If they started their contract now at age 85, they've got almost $400,000, a little bit less, right? 403 versus 394 at age 85, a $515,000 death benefit versus 523. So this is a case where might need some, Lucy, some splaining to do. The death benefit is actually less, as well as the cash value. But again, you're not going to be presenting the comparison to your prospects. You're just going to be presenting these numbers. Don't let these minor differences impact how you feel about this product, because I'm here to tell you, it's still the most powerful tool, personal financial tool, for the average everyday, above average everyday, below average everyday, all averages of everyday household. Still the most powerful tool they could possibly use for their future. Okay, so Juan has a question. He says, one more time, just to be clear, the difference between the MEC line and the yearly premium is what the prospect can add extra per year to accumulate more cash value. Absolutely. Let's take a look at the example there. And we'll use, oops, I have to get the right page. There we go. No. What are we? Oh, is it this here? Yeah. Which one are we looking at there? This one. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at that. Page 13 now, not page 10. In this example, the individual is putting in $1,000 a month, or $12,000 a year. The $12,710 and change MEC line means that they have $710 in change in built-in headroom. So if they got an extra $500 you want to stick in there, go right ahead. But this is the MEC line for years 1 through 7. You'll notice here that there are two lines that are, I've explained these before, but I'll explain them again because they're a little bit a little bit complex, a little bit hard to understand, but hopefully I'll be able to explain it in a way that makes sense to you. Years 1 through 7, this is where the Marcy button comes into play. When you click that Marcy button, this number for years 1 through 7 and years 8 plus will be different. And 8 plus will almost always, I got to say always, be less than years 1 through 7. These numbers are being calculated from different places. And what I mean by that is this number plus the where's it at? Here we go. If you take 350, add $2,561 to it. So if you take $375.61 and you multiply that by 12, okay? And there's an importance of the Marcy button training I did a couple weeks ago, Juan, if you want to go back and watch that. But it gets into it a little bit more detail. But if you take these two numbers, multiply them by 12, and add them to this number, you will get this number. Okay? What does that mean? It means this is the number that they could contribute maximum for the first 7 years. However, year 8 plus, what happens at the end of year 7 and the beginning of year 8, the way when people ask me about this, and I don't really try to explain it unless they ask, but what I will tell them is that in the first 7 years, this is the paid up additions total. Lafayette and the IRS say you can contribute maximum, okay? But at the end of year 7, they look back and say, all right, Juan, okay, we told you could contribute this much, but now it's time to look at what you actually contributed. And because we've run this illustration with these numbers and never changed them, this becomes the ceiling, okay, because there was never any more put into it. If they exercise the option, put in the extra $710 every year, if they could, then the ceiling is going to be this number. If they put in a little bit less than what they were supposed to, or what I shouldn't say supposed to, if they put in a little bit less of a PUA contribution than what they could have, then this number will actually be lower. Okay? What is happening at year 8 is the what you could do, which is years 1 through 7, in year 8 is transformed into what did you do? And they say, this is what we told you could do. And the IRS says, but now, because what you actually did, that sets the ceiling. So when people start getting into, and that becomes important when, and I'll address this with folks when they say, you know what, I think I want to, I think I can do $1,000. And they start asking me a lot of questions about, how much, what if I want to put more in? And I tell them, well, if you want to put more in, we'll raise this number, which raises this number, which will raise this number. You may have heard me go through that before. However, this is square footage. If you do that, if you raise this number and you don't take advantage of the square footage, in year 8, you're going to pay for square footage you never use. This, I like to tell people, you're buying yourself a 12,710 square foot warehouse for cash. If you don't fill it up to the capacity or close to it by year 8, let's say you only did half, this is going to be a lower number, meaning you're only going to be allowed to use what you averaged in the first 7 years, but you're still going to pay for the rest of the contract. So a lot of times people say, well, what do I do and I'll tell people just simply this. Make sure you're starting out with a contract that you know, that you feel supremely confident and completely comfortable with the numbers. Meaning you say, all right, yeah, I know I could buy a huge warehouse for cash, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to fill it. You buy a warehouse that will hold the amount of cash you're very comfortable with. If things go better, you can always just start another contract. It's not that big of a deal. But if things don't go better, then you're stuck with a warehouse you can never fill. And that's the way I like to put it to them. So, all right, so we've kind of burned up almost all of our time. And this is a fairly deep type of issue. I can tell you this. If you just started today in this business, none of this would matter. The only reason I'm going over this tonight is because if you have a if you have a prospect that viewed an illustration before the holiday, like, a couple weeks ago or before, that illustration is based on tables that are no longer available to them. So if you have that situation, reach out to me and let me know so I can help you finesse the process to get the numbers very close and make sure that transition doesn't. It's two things that I'm focused on. Number one, I don't want you to lose the business, obviously, but more importantly is, we're talking, $4,000 or $5,000 difference here at age whatever, and maybe a little bit less in death benefit. A little bit less in cash value, maybe a little bit difference in death benefit, and the decision over, well, before it was this and now it's that, shouldn't be what drives that person's decision. That decision should be, well, now it's this. It's still really good. So you need to do it. Juan is asking, so at this point, if we have a new prospect, we need to be preparing the 2020 illustrations. Yes, because if you have a new prospect and you're trying to you choose Patriot 15, you're going to run into what we ran into when it's going to say you can't do it. So yes, you'll just choose the Patriot 2020. And next week, what we're going to do is talk about some nuances that I'm looking into, and I think you have a really, really simple solution for it. And but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So you need to be here next week. Not to mention, it's going to be our last training for the year. So we got to, I'll need to see you then anyway. But anyway, if there are any other questions, let me know. If not, I'm going to let you get back to your Tuesday night. Next week will be our last training. It will be our last training on this platform. So what that means, we'll be going to Zoom. So keep an eye out. And in about probably 2 weeks or so, you'll get an email asking you to register for the new set of 2020 Agent Academy trainings. As well as the Smart Wealth University first Tuesday of the month trainings. Make sure that will be on the same platform that we're using now. The only platform that's going to use Zoom is going to be this one because it's much more interactive. It's more based on, a lot of screen sharing and things like that, which, as you can tell, we've had that happen. And it seems like a more stable platform from what I'm told. But anyway, so if there are no more questions, I'm going to let you get back to your Tuesday. Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate you dialing in. And I hope that this training made sense. Please, if you have any questions about this stuff, just let me know. And be tuned next Tuesday for what I believe will be a pretty simple way to go about making sure that we are always looking out for the best interest of our clients. And we'll see you then. So God bless. Have a great week. And we'll see you next Tuesday.